Welcome to Harmonising Healthcare with Rosie Mead. I'm Rosie Mead and I help healthcare professionals and family carers to provide relationship-centred dementia care by embedding music into their daily care. This podcast is for carers and healthcare professionals looking to support the well-being of individuals living with dementia. Each week I focus on a specific area of dementia care, bringing in my own experiences of supporting people living with dementia and their carers over the past 10 years, as well as bringing in the experience and knowledge of others. This is an interactive show and I would love to continue the conversation afterwards. You can find me over on Instagram at @IamRosieMead or through my not-for-profit organisation Musica, which is musica-music.co.uk. So let's get stuck into today's episode. In today's episode, I meet with the founder of iAlly, Lucinda Koza. Lucinda is just an amazing person that I came across just recently through social media. And in today's episode, she shares her journey of caring for her dad, being the sole carer of her dad who lives with dementia. He was diagnosed only 2 years ago when Lucinda was just 32. So she shares what it's like to be a millennial caregiver. And she also shares the power of sharing your story and having a support network as you move through this journey as a caregiver. I hope that you enjoyed today's episode. It's a really emotive subject. It's brilliant to listen to Lucinda and her story. Please do share, tag me over on social media at @IamRosieMead. You can also find Lucinda on Instagram at iAllyInc. Enjoy today's episode. So hi everyone, I'm really excited today because I'm bringing on my very first guest of the podcast. And today we've got Lucinda Koza, who is the founder and director of an app called iAlly. And I'm really looking forward to having Lucinda on today. So hi Lucinda, I know it's morning.
Hi. Yes, it is.
And we met, it's only been a week, I think, hasn't it, since we first met and spoke.
That's true.
But I feel like we really kind of hit it off and, we're very aligned in terms of our own work and kind of our mission at the moment. So I thought you'd be a perfect first guest to have on.
Well,
so
thank you so much for having me. I'm excited.
Thank you for being the first one, putting yourself out there. So I just thought it would be really nice to start off with just a kind of introduction about you and your story, and then we'll go from there.
Okay. So I started the app iAlly after my own experience. In late 2018, my father had several strokes, and he is also an alcoholic. So it was hard to tell by his behavior. At least I wasn't around him, but the people that were around him, it was hard for them to tell the symptoms of a stroke because they were similar to, being drunk, I guess, slurred speech and being, disoriented. And but once I finally laid eyes on him, I took him to the emergency room, and he had significant brain damage by that point. And so since he has vascular dementia and Parkinson's, and he has aphasia, so he struggles to communicate. He knows what he wants to say, but he cannot find his words often, most of the time. And so anyway, I became his sole caregiver, which was very shocking to me at the time. I was, so young, and I have siblings, and, my parents are divorced, but I still did not expect to be completely alone. And so I was devastated. I had no idea what to do. And I was taking on all this responsibility, like, power of attorney and healthcare proxy and, in charge of.
How old were you?
I was 32.
God, that's so young to suddenly,
I
become a sole carer. Mm.
Yes. It's like at a time that, I was just figuring out my own finances and, being an adult, and suddenly I was in charge of, you know, this 72-year-old man's finances, and it,
Mm.
it was I don't I mean, I still don't even know how I did it because there was no what really shocked me was that, there was no advocacy for family caregivers, much less, young family caregivers that are alone in their responsibility. There was no one saying, like, "Are you okay?" Number one. Number two, are you going to be able to take this responsibility? And, so I just thought that was terrible. Um, and I really suffered, my mental health suffered. It was traumatic. So really, I've, struggled with PTSD and anxiety, panic attacks. I still feel stuck in this, moment of saving his life. So like I still feel like I'm, like it's an emergency and I'm saving his life, which is not sustainable.
No.
Yeah. Um, but I really knew that I didn't want anyone else to go through what I went through. I was thinking of other young women in particular who, no doubt were in this situation, and I didn't want them to feel alone. So I wanted to create something, a way for us to have each other's backs. If we didn't have advocacy from the government or health insurance or the hospital or whatever, then we could at least advocate for ourselves together
Mhm.
and help each other.
Mm. And
And so,
presumably you didn't know, none of your friends had been carers before? Or?
right, because, I was so young. Um, none of my friends were dealing with this with their parents. It seems like something you don't deal with until you're 50 or 60 or something. That's when your parent is supposed to get sick and you're
Yeah.
supposed to take care of them. But, you know, when
And
you're
do you know anything
30,
about dementia as well? Or was this, you kind of took on this role and learnt about dementia and different types of dementia as well?
yeah, so my grandmother had Alzheimer's,
Mhm.
but that doesn't mean I knew anything about it, and especially I didn't, I mean, the learning curve was so huge. I had to, learn everything about stroke, how it affects the brain, what, aphasia is, like what exactly happened that caused him to have brain damage, like the whole, and it wasn't the doctors who explained it to me. I really just I had to learn from, like, Google or whatever.
Mm.
Um,
Oh God, I mean
yeah,
that must have,
yeah.
I just can't imagine. I think kind of just, listening to you talk right now, I just, yeah, trying to put, I mean, I'm 32, so tomorrow I'm 32, and I
Oh
think
my god.
if I were in your shoes, it's, yeah, so I think it's often very hard to kind of to think about, isn't it? And that's why we need to have these conversations so that people don't
Exactly.
just think, actually, I don't need to be thinking about it now. I'm early 30s. I've got years and years before I need to think about this. Actually, it's really good to be aware of things like this now, in the eventuality that you might need it. And it's, yeah, it's really good to
Absolutely.
raise this.
'Cause that's why I ended up in such a position, is because I had not talked about it. I had no, inkling that I would ever, need to know these things, or much less, be in charge of his care,
Mm,
making all of those decisions about therapy and can he live alone? I mean, the system, the way it is here, they just put all the responsibility on the family caregiver, and they don't ensure that the family caregiver is actually equipped to make decisions like that. So
And that's where, I found it quite shocking when you said that the doctors didn't actually explain. They weren't the ones that you learned from. You actually learned from Google, and like there's some fantastic resources out there on Google. But actually, the time when you're just going through so much, emotionally, actually, it would be really good for you to have something as a caregiver to be kind of told about the condition that you're going to be caring for by the practitioner, and not for you kind of finding bits here and there on Google.
yes, absolutely. And I told the doctor over and over, I have power of attorney and healthcare proxy. So, you can talk to me, yet the doctors were still, they only talked to my dad, but my dad didn't understand. And then later on, he didn't even remember, anything that had happened in the hospital. But somehow these doctors wouldn't talk to me, which, I have my own, feelings about that. Like maybe it's because I was a woman, or it's because I was so young. They just, I think they just wanted to completely overlook me,
Maybe there
which
needs
is
more education around it from a practitioner side as well, because it'd be really really interesting to hear from other caregivers from different ages and sex as well, to see actually, is this a similar issue across the board, or is it kind of certain minority groups that are being excluded from this? And actually, if you're putting your
yes,
dad or any other patient at the heart of their care, if they're not able to communicate well or not able to remember, then you do really need to be bringing in family caregivers to provide the best care for them as an individual. You need to.
right, exactly. And that's sort of what, that's really what I'm trying to do with iAlly, with my app, is the caregiver needs to be empowered, because the caregiver is really the gatekeeper to all of, their loved ones' care, and, you know, information and data and all of that. So I want to empower the caregiver from all standpoints.
I mean, iAllo sounds absolutely brilliant. So I've signed up, looked at the website. So I'd love to know a little bit more about that. How did you get from your dad's story, your personal background, to then creating an app? Was your background in marketing or app development, or how did you? I'd love to know the journey.
Sure. I had done, social media professionally, and like digital strategy, and like I taught myself a lot about the tech world. But myself, I'm not an engineer, so it's sort of like I came up with the idea, but I had no idea how to actually build it.
Yeah.
um, but I knew that, an app was the best way to reach as many people as possible at once. And really, I had the idea since late 2018. And then when the coronavirus pandemic, really started to change everything, that's really when I thought, okay, this is urgent. I need to build a way that family caregivers can depend on each other during this time, because it's, there's so many, like the people we're caring for their immune system is compromised, they're super vulnerable. That leads to, higher anxiety surrounding the whole, pandemic, which there's already a ton of anxiety around. Um, And then also there's that isolation, which is even, that's something that caregivers struggle with anyway. And now maybe some of their support systems, are cut off because so many things are not operating as they usually would. So
Mhm.
that's when I started to really develop the app. And luckily I had a lot of, there were a lot of resources that were available to help people that were trying to create initiatives to address the pandemic and to help people during the pandemic. So even though it was terrible, it was kind of the perfect time to actually build, because everyone was sort of like galvanized to address the situation.
Mhm. Wow.
So,
So
yeah.
it hasn't been very long. So I mean, I realised we didn't put this into context in terms of time. So when did your dad, when was he diagnosed?
um, it was October of 2018, so 2
Mm.
years
So two
almost.
years. So in that time, you've coped with, you've come through being a caregiver and everything that comes with that. You've kind of been landed into that position, and then now you're developing an app as well to support other caregivers. I mean, I don't know whether you've had a moment kind of to take that in, that just how incredible that is, that in 2 years time you've not only kind of helped yourself, but you're helping others too, to kind of to go through this journey.
Well, thank you
That's
for
incredible.
saying that, because it's, I haven't really had that moment. So thank you.
Yeah, and it's definitely like you need to, yeah, kind of just remember that, it's very easy to get stuck in the kind of the busy day to day as well, and just actually, yeah, to take stock of, yeah, what you've gone through so far. So with iAlla, I'd love to know kind of just, yeah, a bit more about that app itself and what people can access when they sign up to it.
Sure. So when you sign up, there's community. So there's peer support and mutual aid. So you can ask for help, you can offer help, ask for advice, um, and you could just share, you know, how your day was, and to be with other people who know exactly what you're going through is so important. So that's sort of the first main piece. And then from there, we have a partnership with Backpack Health, which is a digital service where you can keep all of your loved ones' medical records in one place, and then you're sort of in charge from there of like who you share them with, which is how it should be anyway.
Yeah, it really should. And all over the world, obviously you're based in, was it New Jersey, you said?
Yes, New Jersey,
But
yeah.
really kind of anywhere, wherever you are, this needs, yeah, the caregiver needs to be having those notes and those records.
Right. It's like I keep thinking, the caregiver is already in charge, but they're not empowered. They need to be empowered with being in charge, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. And,
Yeah.
from a support group, from seeing if other people are doing this, or, feeling like you're in a safe, supportive environment where you can share challenges that you're having and know that other people are there who have gone through similar things, and you're all at different stages of this journey.
Yes.
That can be really
And
beneficial.
yeah, and having like, I just think peer support is the best, it's the best way to be heard is, if they can't deny, our existence if we're all together and, we're all sharing our voices.
Mm.
Um, there's power in sort of mobilizing. Um, and so then there's also access for the user to financial coaching and financial education. We have like a program called the Financially Fit Caregiver, um, because it's very hard to be in charge of so much financially.
Mm.
Um, especially for young people. Um, there's also legal counsel, access to legal counsel and paperwork, and there's access to clinical trials. So we have a digital matching service for, like, based on where the user lives and the diagnosis that their loved one has.
Mm-hmm.
They can be digitally matched to any available clinical trials in their area, which is
Wow.
really cool.
Academic. I love that.
Yeah, yes.
And that's, yeah, a way of like linking people up, because often I think there's kind of a disjoint with, the academic research is taking place, but people don't necessarily know that it's happening. And likewise, the researchers don't know how to access people sometimes, to access participants. So that's a fantastic service.
Yes, yes. And that's another way that the caregiver is sort of the gateway, the gatekeeper, the doorman, whatever the word,
Yeah.
um, for data and
Yeah.
research. And yeah, so the
Mm.
caregiver needs to know, what's going on clinically. Um, and there's tons more that we have products, all kinds of products with special discounts
Mhm.
for users. And of course, mental health providers. That's a huge piece that I'm leaving out. Um,
For the carer themselves to look after their mental
yes,
health. Yeah. See, that's so,
yes,
so important, and it's often neglected. I think one, it's not talked about enough, but two, I think, often, like you're saying about empowering caregivers, actually, let's work on empowering them to look after their own well-being and put themselves first sometimes too. It's that whole analogy of the
absolutely.
aeroplane, like put on your own life jacket first, look after yourself, so then you're in a better position to look after others. But it's very easy
Exactly.
to say, but it's, yeah, harder to do. And so that's brilliant that they can access mental health resources through your app.
Yes. So we actually partnered with a company called Arapy. Um, and what's unique about them is that the iAlly user can go directly to the available therapist's schedule, and it's like they can just schedule online,
Mhm.
and they can do a virtual, telehealth session, or they can chat, and text, or they can do walk and talk, like
Mm.
they meet in a park, and sort of, any way to make it more accessible and easier for the caregiver, because like you were saying, they're not putting their own health first.
Mm.
They aren't going to take time out of caring to, travel to an office to see someone. So
Yeah.
this way we're just trying to make it as easy as possible
Mm.
so that the caregiver can take care of their own health and mental health.
Which is so important. That sounds
Yeah.
brilliant. So when you say caregiver, are you meaning all ages, or are you focusing on a certain age because you yourself have come from kind of young carer type background?
Well, so that's such a good question, because initially I was really focusing on the millennial generation,
Hmm.
um, because of all of this data. Like, millennials are going to replace boomers as the biggest generation, and there's going to be this, big transference of wealth because of the boomer generation sort of turning 70 at a rate of 10,000 people per day. Um, so basically, we're all going to be taking care of the boomer generation, basically.
Mm.
Um, and, none of us are prepared.
No.
But I am, I realize that iAlly is helpful for all kinds of family caregivers, like parents of children with special needs, and obviously care partners like spouses,
Mm.
and it just, I have users who take care of their sibling. It's
Mm.
really anyone. um but I feel like there are more resources available for older family caregivers, if that makes sense, because there's this idea that you don't have to take care of your parent until you are 50 or 60, and that's just not the reality anymore. So
No, and that's the thing with dementia. I mean, this month is World Alzheimer's Month, and obviously, kind of awareness around that is that Alzheimer's is just one type of dementia, and dementia is the umbrella term. But people think of dementia, and they often still think of it being an older person, and it kind of being the normal part of aging, and it really isn't. And you get younger people now with dementia. So there needs to be much more awareness around this, is that a caregiver likewise isn't just someone that is over 65, that, and their partner or spouse or whoever it is equally an older generation. That's, it's just
yep,
not the case anymore.
yep.
But you still find
So
it's not talked about often enough, which is why I sort of wanted you on as a first guest to kind of break this taboo a little bit around this subject. Is that actually it's, and then we need to
definitely.
encourage people to talk about it as well. There'll be a lot of like millennial carers out there that you're not even aware of, that they're kind of struggling on their own, or kind of trying to cope through this, and actually
Yes.
reaching out and letting them know there are support networks out there, that there are other people that go through this too.
Yes, and that's the isolation is the worst piece of the whole thing, is feeling like, no one else understands, and but they do. And I want to encourage millennials to talk about it. And
Mm.
it feels scary because you think no one else understands, so it feels scary to tell your story. But I just want to encourage other young people to say, that they're going through this and that it's hard, and because the data shows that there are so many. So
Yeah, there are that many out there, and that that it's okay to lean into that. I love like Brené Brown, and that whole thing about like leaning into vulnerability. Like
yes.
it's okay, and you don't always have to be saying, on social media, this kind of rose tinted effect of, I'll only post things if things are going amazing, and I won't share if I'm struggling or I'm having a hard time. And actually it's kind of encouraging. I mean, empowerment has kind of really come out of this conversation, is it's about empowering people to have those conversations, and feel that it's perfectly fine and that to start connecting with other people as well, whether in the place where you live, or globally too. I'm presuming that anyone can access iAlly. I mean, I accessed it here, so
Oh yeah, so anyone, of course, anyone.
that's great.
Yes,
And
yeah.
to know that you've got that support network there, I think that's so important. So I wanted to move on a little bit to music, only because you sent me over the most wonderful video before we came on. Would you like to, obviously, like, people can't see the video, but would you like to explain what was in it?
Sure. It was the morning after. It was the first morning. We were in the hospital for like 5 days, and it was the first morning. And my father was not communicative, and but he was sitting up in his bed, and so I played Cat Stevens' "Morning Has Broken" from my phone, and I just started dancing, like, just like dancing to the song, like, for my dad, and he just sat there and like and watched. And that was my only, that was the only way I knew I could try to connect with him,
Mm.
because he loved music. And I wanted to connect in a way that wasn't verbal.
Hmm. It's just so powerful watching it. It was quite emotional to see, especially knowing the context of, your dad hadn't long been diagnosed. You had just kind of come into this carer role, like unknowingly. And yeah, it was just amazing to see how you were communicating with him and how it just seemed so natural that you were just moving around, in time to the music. And obviously the music itself is really like emotional as well.
I know.
But it was just so beautiful. It was really raw, really vulnerable. This, yeah, just to see kind of the power of that, really. And do you find, does your dad respond to music, or have you used it very much with him?
Yes, he definitely responds. It's funny because I'll think of things from when I was little, like oh my goodness, this song. Um, it's like Tippy Canoe and Tyler too, and do you know what that is at all? It was a song for like it was like an American political
Oh, okay.
something bizarre
Yeah.
from a long, long time ago. And he used to sing it in like a funny, joking sort of way when I was little. And I asked him about it recently, and he remembered it, and he said, and I'd gotten an Amazon Alexa. And so then I was like, Alexa, play Tippy Canoe and Tyler too. And then it played it, and it was like this just moment of like connection and just like remembering. And I
Mm.
mean, he loves Bob Dylan. He will listen to Bob Dylan for hours. And I just, that's how I know that he's still him, is that I'll say, early one morning the sun was shining and I was laying in bed, and then he will continue to sing the Bob Dylan lyric.
Mm.
So that's how we connect a lot.
See, that's amazing, and that's obviously a lot of the stuff I talk about is about, yeah, like connecting through music and that kind of meaningful music. So really knowing the individual that you're caring for, and obviously he's your dad, and you do really know him, and the music that's going to resonate. Because yeah, I think often
Right.
the message can get diluted, and people think music is brilliant, but actually it's not. Music as the whole term is very specific, meaningful pieces. And so that's brilliant.
That's so true. That's so
Yeah,
true.
and then it's kind of just communicating that. So, letting other care providers know, if the individual you're caring for is in a care home or they're transferred to a hospital, it's kind of, yeah, remembering that actually music's not just a nice to have, but remembering to mention stuff like this to their care providers. So, because I think often, it's so easy to forget, and actually that can be a really important thing for the care provider to connect with them.
That is so true. That sometimes that's so true, because it took me a little while, like it's easy to think of it as a nice to have, which is so wrong, you
Yeah.
know, because even, in my life, music is so central to who I am. And I mean, it's for everyone.
Yeah, for all of us. And likewise,
Yeah.
carers taking care of their own mental well-being. That actually, yeah, using music in our own lives. I often say about like being your own DJ, and that's so true. You can kind of change how you're feeling, or find music to match how you're feeling. It's perfectly fine to kind of to sit in that negative emotion for a bit and actually play music that matches your mood, or yeah, or completely alter your mood and uplift you and take you to somewhere better for your well-being. So it's that kind of, we can be in control of our well-being through, yeah, being our own DJ.
That is so true.
Yeah, no, it is. But like when I say it, I'm like, oh, like this is the most simple thing to say. But we don't think about it in that way often. I think we take it for granted, that music's always there. And actually, if we had, imagine if like we had no access to anything that could play music, and we were kind of waiting for other people to control it. it's just to think about how you be, because we take it for granted that we can, I access the radio or my phone in the car and when I'm working, and you just do it without thinking. And I think
Totally.
for that reason, that then it just becomes something that we don't put an importance on it, because we don't have the time to take a step back and realize how important music is. So that's
Yes. And what's interesting is I got my dad that Alexa, but I asked him if he was, because he always can find Bob Dylan, but I asked him if he can, listen to other things. I was like, everything is on here. And he said, well, I don't remember the names of things. And of course, it makes sense. He remembers, the feeling, or he can remember, the melody, but not the name of. So I wish there were a way that he could find, I don't know, I wish he could sing something and then, he could find it that way. Or
As if any kind of tech people are listening.
I
It
know.
is such a barrier. Or someone living with dementia maybe not necessarily remembering how to operate the Alexa, or the fact you've got to say Alexa. So it's like,
Yes.
how can we make it easier? Or I talk a lot about having different playlists. So while it would probably be really easy to just have the one like dad playlist and then tell him all you need to say is Alexa, play dad playlist, but actually what if he doesn't want to listen to dad playlist, if he wants other playlists? And then it can become quite confusing. So I think kind of the tech nowadays it's brilliant and we can access so much, but actually in terms of kind of disabled access and people living with dementia accessing it more, it's not quite there, it's not fully accessible.
Yeah, it's not. I mean, part of my dad's illness is that he can't use any technology. I mean, he can answer the phone when I call because it will say like Lucinda is calling, but beyond that, I mean, he could never go on his phone and he doesn't use any data.
Yeah, and to find songs and that kind of thing. And that's where we've really got to empower the carer as well,
Yes.
taking this on. And also it's a nice thing to do together. It's a really nice activity to be delving into the music that you like, and likewise music that you as a carer enjoy as well, and sharing that with the person you're caring for. It's a two-way street.
Yes. Yes.
It's so important. So brilliant. Oh, we've covered so much.
I know.
We've gone through so much. I also feel like I've really connected with you through
I
this.
know. I feel like we are so similar, and I'm so glad we found each other
I know,
through
and that's
social media.
power of social media. It can be
Yes.
really good, and it is a really good, there's supportive networks out there, and I think that's the great work of iAlly is promoting that fact that we can still be connecting wherever you are in the world. There are other people going through similar issues as you, so it's just fantastic, and I wish you the best of luck with it. I'm really excited to see its journey as it's so new, but you've already achieved so much with it, which is just
Thank you so much.
thank you. So I thought to kind of round up this episode, I was just thinking about if someone's watching this video or listening to this podcast, if they could take away one thing from this episode, what would you want it to be?
I would want it to be to tell your story, um, because I think that's hard and it's scary, but it's the only way that we can make progress. And it's the only way that we can learn what's really going on and learn from each other. And, there's power in vulnerability. And I actually just, that comes from RuPaul. I just was watching Drag Race and he said, there's power in vulnerability. And I thought, that's it. There is power in vulnerability. and the benefits will outweigh, you know, any sort of consequences of telling your story.
That's so powerful. I think, yeah, that's a brilliant way to wrap up today's episode. So thank you very much, Lucinda. Lucinda Koza, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. I hope that you enjoyed it. Please share with your contacts and don't forget to tag me. You can find me over on Instagram at @IamRosieMead or through my not-for-profit organisation Musica over at www.musica-music.co.uk.